Hello, Mr. Joy.
Hello, Davo, my friend.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Yes. Okay, so I guess like this begs the question. So why are we recording this conversation?
Why are we recording this conversation? It's our new
Yes.
podcast.
Excellent.
It's a brand new
What's the,
podcast.
what's the idea
What's the
behind
name
it?
of it?
No, the idea.
What's the idea? The idea is to um, just have a go and create a podcast where we talk about whatever we want, whatever is on our minds, and we just, yeah, have a great conversation.
Excellent. That sounds
And
good.
and the more important thing is we do it consistently. So this is the consistent podcast,
Lol.
a
I like
working
it.
title. Working title.
The consistent podcast, yes. That sounds punchy and strong.
it yeah, it's a podcast about not nothing. It's a podcast about something, but the gist of it is it's a podcast. And
Excellent.
I don't know how you say how would you describe it? It's just a consistent podcast.
The Jab Jab podcast.
The jab jab. What do you mean by
Nah,
that?
never mind. Look, I think like we should just like take it where it goes, and like we'll evolve over time and see. I think the original idea is just to present a few topics of conversation, try to like reflect and like have a conversation between the two of us, and like and see where that takes us and shut down, and then the next week we'll like reflect and try to see like what we can do next.
Yeah, that sounds good. I I wonder though, do you think we should talk about the podcast itself and the the making of and the sort of behind the scenes as well during the podcast? Because
I
that's a
guess
learning experience for us. Like this whole adventure is for us to learn about podcasting and recording and presenting.
that's a really good point. Look, I so like in my day job, I work as a marketer, as you know. I organize a bunch of events for a tech company, and some of those events are actually virtual events. I run a webcast series for the company that I work for, and the format of those are like fireside chat type of conversation, which I think is not very different to what we're doing right now. The only difference is that it's a bit more scripted, right? So basically, we identify and we invite these guest speakers that tend to be industry experts in cybersecurity specifically. And before we go live with these people, or before we record the session, that we have like a little workshop, and we try to bubble up the different topics of conversation, right? And that help us, or that helps me like create a script of maybe some guided questions that we could ask in the on the spot, right? And so I guess like that's a bit of my comfort zone. I don't normally don't go on these sessions live. I'm more on the production side of things, but I know like that's kind of like my comfort zone, like having a little bit of a script and like just elaborate on conversation. So
All
for
right.
me, I see this like this little adventure that we are exploring right now as a way to like to to like enable my like speaking abilities, and like being a little bit more eloquent and just reflecting on the spot, and like just I love talking to you anyway, and like we've been friends for many years, and like I think you are a geek like I am. We enjoyed similar conversation, like similar like topics of conversation, so yeah, why not? Um, so I guess we should just go with it. And back to your original point, like should we like reflect on the behind the scenes, yeah, for sure. But like I think we should just like talk about it, and yeah, like I know that you
We'll
wanted to.
see.
Yeah, we'll see how we go. But anyway,
Yeah.
so you want to have a chat about a specific topic. You want to bring it up, or you want to reflect on any of the things I just said before.
Um, yeah, so I think it will be a great experience for us to do this and yeah, from what you said, improve speaking skills, um, articulation skills, being more comfortable um, in front of a camera, essentially. Whether it's in a podcast or in a Zoom meeting. I think having this, and especially the reflection part, um, and the sort of behind the scenes chatter, whether it makes it to air or not, I think that's a really important part um, of this journey. So it's not just like doing the podcast and then throwing it up there. It's really reflecting and criticizing on what we can actually do and improve. As you know, I want to treat it as a serious podcast show, even though it's pretty unprofessional right now. But that's where it starts, right?
Exactly. That's it. I love it, my friend. So okay, so you want to bring up the first thing that you wanted to discuss?
Yeah. So I mean, with the election coming up, the election's
Okay.
coming up. You are a first-time voter. Is that
Mm-hmm.
correct? Have you ever voted before? Like in Colombia,
Yeah.
have you voted?
Yes, I have. I have.
Uh-huh. And I mean, I guess so as a first voter, I'm very interested in how you see the Australian political landscape and what your thoughts are, and also how you sort of came up with these thoughts. Like, what have you been exposed to? So you are in, first of all, you're in the seat of Hughes. So currently, that seat
Yep.
is held by Craig Kelly, the liberal turned independent turned United Australia Party dude.
Yes.
He's been through a lot and he's said a lot. Have you heard of him at all in the past
Yeah.
and since recently?
Yeah. Okay. Look. So I think um, let me just answer the first. I guess like the first point that you brought up, right? So like, yes, this is the first election that I experience as a voter in Australia. I've been in Australia for the past 10 years to the moment that we are recording this session. And my experience of elections, like me voting was like before that in Colombia. I just to give you a little bit of context. So I think Colombia follows the election like model or methodology that you see in the states. Or actually, no, that's not an accurate assessment. But the thing is, like, there are candidates that like go forward for like as candidates for president. Like we have presidents in Colombia,
Hmm.
and I think like in my experience that's a little bit easier because you know who to vote for to begin with. Like you vote for Joey or you vote against David, right? And those guys campaign over like sometime like for like a few months or sometimes a few years, and you know like what they stand for. So I think that's one of the like main differences, and I think it's kind of like similar to what you see on the states, because you see like in the previous elections where like Donald Trump like versus like Joe Biden, right? And you see like what they stand
Yeah.
for, like you see like the public images and all this type of thing. So and they tend to be really polarized. So like yeah,
Hmm.
like I don't like these guys, perception of like I don't know like whatever topic, and it's easier for you to determine like which side of the political spectrum you sit on. Um, so I came to Australia with that like mentality, like trying to find on the news like what the prime minister is saying these days, right? And if he's gonna be elected, like, that maybe I follow his like chain of thoughts or like chain of like
Yeah.
projects, and that will make it easier for me. But like what I found is that, like, and please correct me if I am wrong, right? Like the
Hmm.
election system works in a little bit like a little bit different. Like you first vote for like a party, and then the parties like they choose the leaders like for each one of the localities that they're based on, right? So you're voting for parties, and they ultimately they tend to they vote for the for the prime ministers. Is that correct? Like that's how it works in Australia.
Well, sort of. So we have different electorates, which is
Yeah.
kind of similar to the US, where they have different sort of areas, and you count the votes and compare the votes within each area, right? So
Mm,
we have those electorates, and when in those electorates, there are representatives that you vote for.
mm,
So every person sort of in the like every minister in the party, including the prime minister, they have a seat. They have an electorate. So you're voting for your area's sort of representative in the Senate, which is the upper house, and in the House of Representatives, which is the lower house. And that part is similar to the US. Um, but yeah, in Australia, it's less about. It's still mostly about the prime minister, um, who's the leader and the guy that will be talking. But you're also thinking about the the individual candidates for your seat. And
but
like
you don't
if
vote
you
for a prime minister. I mean, like you don't vote for the candidate to
no,
become a prime minister. You vote for the for the
you vote
seat
for
on
the
the Senate. So like they have a majority of representation on the government that and then they
yeah,
choose a prime minister, right?
yeah. So I mean, you know who the prime minister is, right? It's
Yeah,
like Scott Morrison versus Anthony Albanese, Adam Bant for the Greens.
yeah,
Those are like the major three parties, and the Greens are a minor party. But yeah, you're voting for the representative who belongs to a party or is an independent. And then if they win the seat, that seat goes, that seat is filled by the party, and then you need a certain number of seats in the House of Representatives to fill up, and whoever has the most seats, like the party that has the most seats, they become the government,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
But
you're not voting
but
for the person, you're
yeah,
voting for the
exactly.
prime minister and also the people in the party.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks so much for clarifying all that. Yeah, so I think so. Yeah, like I think that was very close to what I had in my mind of how it worked.
Yeah,
And yeah, but anyway, so you don't vote for the person specifically, like you kind of like are pushing for like a set of ideas that represent a specific party, and then like if you have the quorum in the Senate or in the like in the Congress and all this, um, like then those guys choose their leaders, and then ultimately if they have like the majority they get to choose the prime minister, right? And
yeah,
so in Colombia, or in my experience voting, like it's different in the sense that like tomorrow I can go forward and say like, hey, I want to become the next president, and like assuming that I have the popularity and like and all the cash to campaign and all this stuff, like I could create my own independent party, and like people can vote for me immediately, and I can become the president. And so that's kind of like the main difference on how the system works. So but anyway, the so I think that we covered that the first part of your question, and the second question is like how has the my experience like actually like voting, and how am I thinking on the like on the process, right? And I think like you mentioned something, like I mean like after all these discussion that we had, it's um like I think it's like it like when you go through like this process of like choosing the parties and not the people, I think the like it how can I articulate this? I think like it's very difficult for independent um like ideas to become popular because like the leaders in the government, like people that traditionally have like led campaigns and that have like managed all of the projects for the country, like have been the main two parties that like have existed for forever, right? Which is laborers and liberals, and they have all of the like the political engine. They have like all the cash, and like that's what you see all the time on the media, and all of the seats are dominated by these people, right? So if I wanted to start a new party and start competing, like or create an opposition for this party, like it's extremely difficult. That you need lots of resources, and again, like I have to start in a little neighborhood, and hopefully, like I get chosen, so my ideas get listened. Like, and I think the process, like just by design, like it takes way too long, and I don't know for how long these parties have existed, Labor and Liberal. I assume since conception of the country, but like that's hundreds of years, right? So it's very difficult to remove them out of power so other people can jump again, right? So my
Right.
thinking was, so yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. To your point, I think that's yeah. You're thinking a lot about like the sort of popularity aspect of sort of stuff more akin to American politics, where your the popularity part is a big thing because um, for a big reason for that is it's not compulsory to vote in
Mm,
the US. I don't know how it is Colombia. Is it compulsory to vote in
no,
Colombia? No.
no.
So that's a major difference. Whereas
Mm,
here it is compulsory. You get fined if you don't vote. So that's a point of difference. Another point of difference is that in terms of actually counting the votes, you're not just counting the most. So there's this thing called preferences. So when you go and vote, you put down a one next to your most preferred person, and then you put a
mm,
two next to your second most preferred person, and so on and so forth, as many numbers as you want. And basically, what happens is they all count the ones, right? And
mm,
then if the person with the most one votes, if they don't have over 50% of the vote, then all of the other sort of lower people that didn't get as many votes, the people that voted for them, their secondary vote gets counted and then added to sort of the first and second votes. So it's a
mm.
preference. So your vote isn't just discarded if you vote for someone random in the ballot. Your vote will be counted if the the leader that scored the highest in the first preference doesn't get the majority. So that system is completely different to other countries. And so every person's vote basically counts in a way. Because as long as you
All
put
right, that's
preferences
what I hear
down,
now.
yeah, yeah. So that's a really important thing to know. Like whatever you put down as your first preference, whoever it might be, um, your other secondary, third, fourth, fifth preferences may also be counted in a case where there's no huge majority. So if there's some guy that's super popular in your electorate and he gets 70% of the vote, then yeah, that's fine. But as if he gets like say 40% of the vote, then the sort of losers, their votes get counted um, and then put into the sort of remaining people. And in that way, um, lower sort of non-major party candidates, they actually have a good chance, depending on sort of where you are and yeah, sort of what your angle is and sort of how contested the electorate is, just
All
because of
right,
that
well,
majority preference rule.
that's good. Yeah, that's refreshing. That's something I didn't know about the system, and I'm glad that I know it because elections are actually in a couple of weeks. So like it's good to know
Exactly.
the process. The other thing that I wanted to like to discuss also like on the second part of your question is so like we actually last weekend you and I we were discussing on like who to vote for and all this stuff. Maybe without going into much detail, but like I my the conversation that I was having is like like I been in these like in this government for the past 10 years, and I know that for longer than that the the labor no the liberal party is like has been leading the country,
Yeah, for
right?
like nine
And
years, I
like
think.
yeah, so like yeah, like what I have seen is that the government, like I see there's buildings and there is roads being built, and like I know that I like my experience is like the tax money like gets used in many of the things, right? So um, and I put a high contrast on how things work in Colombia, which is very different because there's a lot
Mm,
of corruption and a lot of these things, right? So like I came to a functioning quote unquote a country on the perspective of that. And in fact, like when you see the news in Australia, yeah, there is scandals, uh, but like like it's quite different. Like I remember just maybe just to reflect, but like the type of scandals that you hear is like, this guy cheated on his wife, and yeah,
yeah,
like
yeah.
that's outrageous and that's unacceptable. Like it's like it's not moral, right? But like for example, you're not stealing food from like from kids that otherwise they don't have any supply of nutrition. Like and that type of shit happens in South America.
Mm,
There was a big scandal. So there this was maybe like 10 or 15 years ago. There is this system that provides like supplies for families that need it the most, and there is a lot of kids, and they put like basically like food packages, and some of those like they have like in these packages they have like the bare minimum, like bare minimum. Sometimes they have like let me just try to find a photo here in a second. Sorry to drag it, but
it was basically like a charity.
yeah. So like let me just quickly show you the screen here, and so these I'm just showing you the photos of what this looks like. So it's like a little bag, and what I understand is that they have this. It's kind of like a cereal. Is like is food that you have to like mix it and I think like with water or something, and it has like
Uh,
basic nutrients for kids, right?
so
And
Soylent Green, basically.
yeah, you see like there's a photo here, like there's a like a little powder that you mix it with something, and that provides the bare minimum nutrients for
Mm,
kids, right? And otherwise, like these people, like these families that get benefited with this type of thing, like they're like so poor that if they don't have these, they literally suffer starvation and die.
yeah.
And my dude, like literally, like that was the same time period when I came to Australia, and there was a
Mm,
scandal that politicians were stealing this stuff to sell them, um, like
wow.
elsewhere, right? So that's the type of corruption that you see, like literally, like getting like food out of like the poorest of the poorest, so
Yeah.
that they kind of have like cash. So I came to a country that is like functioning very differently, right? Without saying that it's good or bad or like all these type of things. So so my thinking is like, look, like yeah, maybe it's not the ideal, but you see, like there are industries that support the country, and like it's first world country is super developed. You can walk on the streets and you're not gonna get mugged, you're not gonna get stabbed, like it works. So my thinking was like, like why changing something that
That
that is
isn't
work.
broken.
Yeah, that isn't broken. So that's my
Yeah.
perspective as an immigrant, right? And but you brought out a really interesting point, and all this was just to land on this point, right? So you mentioned uh, Craig. Kelly, right?
Yes.
And so he, like, for the electorate that I am in, is Hughes. He used to be the party leader for this one, and I think he quit to his position in the Liberal Party,
Hmm.
and now he is the, like, the lead candidate for the Australian, what is that one called?
The United Australia Party,
United Australian Party.
Clive Palmer's party.
Yes. So, you and I had a really I didn't know anything about this guy, and you you brought up a few interesting points, that the guy is an anti-vaxxer, the guy is a climate denialist,
Yep.
and
Yep.
basically, yeah. So, like, and that brought a bunch of, like, red flags to me, because like you have to follow science, and otherwise, like, we're just fucked as a
Yeah.
society, right? Um, so I did the research, and you sent me a really interesting video on how, like, independent parties, like, are elevating their narratives, and they're becoming more relevant, and they're getting a lot of funding from this company called, can you remind me?
Climate 200, I think
Climate
it was.
200. Yes.
Yeah. So
Um,
that's
yeah, go for it.
that's a bit of a yeah. It's basically one guy who's sort of started this sort of fundraising um, sort of thing to fundraise these independent candidates. Um, and he says he like it's not a party. Like if a bunch of independents are getting funded by the same person, you'd think they have sort of essentially, would think the same and vote the same in terms of like parliament and stuff, and so might be considered as one party. But the guy swears that he's just funding sort of these people independently, and they get to think what they want and say what they want. Um, but yeah, independents. Going back to the point I was talking about earlier, independents have a very good chance, including in your seat, in your electorate, because they specifically target um, electorates and groups of people that are sort of disenfranchised or don't want to vote for the major parties, because compared to some other countries, the two major parties, Labour and Liberal, are kind of similar. Right? Liberal is a bit more right wing, if you will, and Labour's more left leaning, but it's nowhere near as polarizing as in the US, for example. So people sort of get lost um, in seeing the two as sort of different flavors of the same thing. And that's where independents come in, especially in this election, where climate change is, I think, the most important issue for like voters in general. Whereas in previous elections, it would be, I don't know, third, fourth, fifth most important. And so these independents have a very strong climate agenda, and they're pushing really hard um, for tangible climate action and um, sort of things like closing down coal plants and stopping mining and all that sort of stuff. So those are the sort of main reasons why for this election independents are gaining popularity. It's because they're targeted and they know what they're about, and they know the sort of people and areas that will resonate with them, and that includes your seat, right? And it helps them that Craig Kelly is this guy who's like an absolute nut job and like is now in one of the nut job parties, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And look, after you told me all this, I've been um, educating myself as much as I can, and like, trying to investigate what the I like the main candidates for my electorate are, and like, just trying to read a little bit of more of background on what
That's
they have
good.
to say, their ideas, and all this stuff. But the last thing that I wanted to comment, and also going back to my point earlier about how the big parties have an advantage, even though like the system as you were describing it, like provides some advantage for independent parties to become a little bit more relevant. And is that, for example, like I think there are 3 or 4 independent candidates. No, actually, there's more, but like there are 4 or 5 independent candidates for like with different political views, right, in my electorate.
Right.
And so you Google one of these people, and and you don't find anything. There's maybe 1 or 2 articles, and
Mm,
that's pretty much it. Then you Google the other one, and it's just like like he's this person, like this random dude that just happens to have a YouTube channel with 5 videos, and they only have 18 views, right? So and you go to the websites and you see exactly what you were saying. Like they picked up that the media and like the importance of climate change, and all of them the first topic is like I'm gonna be super strong with like I'm gonna drive
mm,
the agenda for climate change. And then you have anyway. So like my point is like it's very hard to formulate like a strong opinion, or like to formulate like a really concise view of like, okay, I'm gonna support an independent, because it's hard to like to develop some trust
yeah.
based on just like a 3 minute YouTube video that is was just maybe shot by the person's son or daughter. Like like I have a camera. The guy just like, yes, my name is David, and like I'm a former teacher, and whatever. Like so I don't know. Whereas you have all of the political engine of more established parties, and like I think that it's a bit easier for you to formulate like a more educated opinion when you have like these big parties. So that's where I am.
Yeah. I mean, yes, you're absolutely correct. Like the independents will not have as much, basically, let's call it marketing resource, because that's what it is, right? You're
Mm,
marketing yourself. Not as much marketing resource as the major parties. Like the major parties have, the major newspapers, the major TV channels, um, the major online news websites, which obviously is related to the News Corp and Fairfax and all that sort of stuff. And then they have the budget to spend on digital advertising, which is highly effective because it can be highly targeted. And that's what we saw in the 2016 election, right? Um, so yeah, that's a big point against independence, and yeah, which is why that it's a bit interesting, and a lot of sort of political analysts, like in the video, have covered that independents are actually gaining ground in spite of all of that,
yeah.
right? They have the disadvantage, but they are being really, really highly targeted in certain seats, and they're getting a lot of effect. And we could talk about like media bias and sort of the control media has on the conversation, and how one sort of group, like sort of Rupert Murdoch newspapers, they could formulate a story, they run with it in the newspapers um, and on their sort of news assets, and then basically the rest of the media will follow that, and that's the news for the day. Um, there's definitely a lot of that going on, which you have to sort of look um, a bit more closely and sort of look at it from an independent view, and have um, opinions from independent journalists and analysts on that in order to see it. So it's not as blatant as, Fox News versus CNN or something in the US. It's not as blatant as that. Um, but the sort of point is that the independents will the reason why independents are going to be so important, even though they're only targeting like a few seats, is that right now it's actually really hard to get a majority. So back to what I was talking before, how you elect the representative, and whatever party they're from, they go to fill out the seats. in the parliament, and then whoever has the most has becomes, has the prime minister and becomes the government. But in order to like pass laws and bills and stuff, the parliament will vote for it, right? And you obviously want a majority of your party in the parliament to be able to pass laws easily that you want. So if you don't have a majority, that means you don't have um, a lot of power in terms of putting through bills that become law. Do you know what I mean? Like you can have a majority, but you might not have. Sorry, you can have the most seats, but you might not have the majority of the seats. So if it's like 100 seats, you could have 48 of the seats, and the next highest could be like 40, but you don't have majority because you only have 46. So that's where independents come in, because when you're voting for a bill and you can't get the majority of the votes, the independents, because they're not affiliated with either party, they could potentially vote for your bill. And so, you know, you have to sort of then negotiate with the independents and then maybe try and give them something that they want to add to the bill in exchange for their vote. So that's the reason. That's the other reason why independents are super important, because they can basically swing and decide what happens and the laws that pass in the country. So if it's like super close in terms of the major parties, an independent could vote one way or the other, and so they have a lot of power.
Interesting. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very interesting. I'm getting hyped with the like with the elections, to be honest.
yeah. I
Uh,
mean, you have a very interesting seat because I think it's pretty contested right now. Like my seat is heavily liberal, very heavily
okay.
liberal. So whatever I vote, it probably won't matter because the liberal candidate will probably get the majority. So pretty boring for me.
Well, I guess we'll catch up in a couple of weeks and we'll see what happens with this stuff.
Exactly.
They look like, and I was just also like thinking on something that you said before, and it was about this guy that is funding some of these independents. Can you tell me again the name, like the
Um,
project that they have?
Climate 200.
Climate 200, yeah. So you were saying that, like I also saw like a few like videos of the guy um saying like, oh no, like I'm not funding a political party, like I'm not choosing the candidates, like we're just funding, like independence.
Yeah,
uh,
so Climate 200, Simon Holmes a Court. He's like a
yes.
really rich dude. And basically they're just sort of funding these independents because they have the strongest climate agenda.
Yeah.
So that's
the
why they're
question
pumping
that
so much
the question
money.
that I have is that, so obviously the guy is invested on climate 200, right? And without knowing much about the guy, like, do you know if the guy has like a big company on like supporting like solar power or something like that, like that?
Oh,
that
you mean like some sort of like financial benefit?
yeah.
Um, so he is a he's an advisor to the Climate and Energy College at Melbourne University. He is a clean tech investor, climate philanthropist. Um, yeah, I mean, well, that's the Climate 200 website, so they're not gonna list any potential conflicts of interest. But um, yeah, I mean, he's a bit of a mystery relatively, but he has spoken openly about his funding of independence and stuff. But I mean, yeah, he's just sort of a person that's really behind um, and investing his money in like clean technology and stuff, which obviously will benefit from if there's a shift in policy towards clean technology and against like fossil fuel. So that's his agenda.
Well, that's very interesting, dude. We'll see what happens
There's
with this.
yeah, there's a lot for you to think about. There's a lot, which is good. I mean, like sometimes politics in Australia isn't that exciting compared to the sort of clown show that's American politics. But yeah, I think this year it's getting a lot more heated and there's a lot more discussion going around.
Yeah. Which who knows if it's a good thing, dude.
Yep,
I
we
guess
will
sometimes
see.
sometimes if it's boring is good. Then everything is working.
Well, I mean, the last 2 years definitely have not been boring.
Yes. Yes,
In
that is
in in like world politics, in a world politics sense.
yeah, that is true. That is true. So how long have we been rolling with this?
I don't know, a
Like
long time,
like
at
40
least
minutes
30
or so.
minutes.
Yes.
I think we can call it there.
I think we could.
That was a
Um,
spirited discussion, and that probably will conclude episode 1 of
yes.
the Consistency podcast with David and Joey.
Virtual high five.